Hey folks, Corey Knapp here. Hope everybody's having a great night. Welcome to our live AZ-900 Azure Fundamentals Exam Bootcamp. I'll get everything out of the way here in just a minute. Let's do our intro and let's kick things off. Hey folks, once again, welcome to week one of the Azure AZ-900 Fundamentals Bootcamp. A lot going on. Apologize, I was a few minutes late here, but we're going to kick things off and number one, talk about what to do here, what we're looking at doing on our journey to becoming a cloud engineer. If we take a look at what I presented real quick here. Hey, Walter, good seeing you. I'm doing well, sir. Yeah, just a crazy night getting ready. I don't know if you guys can see here. Trixie's in the background again. Hopefully she's not busy cleaning herself like she did last time and made a fool of me. But and she's barking now, so great. But thanks for coming, Walter. I appreciate it. As I showed y'all last time, we have our Cloud Basics journey. So up here is Azure Cloud Fundamentals. And this can be, like I said, AWS, GCP. In my case, I am the big bald Azure guy, so I like Azure. But you can change this out for whatever you want. Instead of the AZ-900, maybe you take the Google Digital Cloud Leader. If you take the AWS Cloud Practitioner, I think is what it is. But regardless, what I want to do is kick things off here on how you're going to start your cloud journey. Now, you can't do much without knowing what you're going to be doing here. So let's share the screen out here. What I did is I went to Google and I Googled AZ-900 and I brought up the Microsoft Learn page for Exam AZ-900 Microsoft Azure Fundamentals. And what this does here, let's blow this up so you can really see it. And let me make the screen slightly bigger so everyone can see it. And you'll see this is for technology professionals who want to demonstrate foundational knowledge of cloud concepts in general and Microsoft Azure in particular. It's a starting point in a journey towards a career in Azure. The fundamental things you'll be able to do when you finish this exam or even this training, folks. You don't have to take the exam. I recommend you do if you're going to go Azure, but you don't have to. You'll know how to do architectural components in Azure services like compute, networking, storage, basic secure governed administration of Azure. And you should also have some skills working in an area of IT like either infrastructure management, database management, or software development. Now, I want to tell you, that may sound a little scary that it says you should have experience doing this. Trust me, folks, you don't. This is a completely fundamental beginner exam, and that is the reason why I have people take this one first. This one exposes you immediately to what cloud is. There is no need to have any kind of exposure. I mean, if you know you're A+, or you're Network Plus, hey, you're ahead of the curve. If you don't worry about it. I want people to realize that cloud, IT in general is for everyone. And this is just one of the great exams that are out there to get your feet wet and get started. So as you scroll down this page, you'll see that to take this exam, it's $99 US. You can take it online or you can take it in person at a Pearson VUE testing center. They do offer free practice exams as you go through. So if you click here, learn more about practice exams, take a free practice assessment, and this will actually bring up, let's actually log in here as myself here real quick. Of course, it's going to make me authenticate, just the way things are, you know. But what we can do is I'll just show you what the exam testing procedures look like. And if I have to authenticate one more time, I love multi-factor authentication, but there are times when it is just inconvenient, like right now. Yeah, we'll stay logged in. Why not? I'm not creating a profile. Yeah, sure, whatever. I am in the US. And back to learn. And this will actually give you a 50 question multiple choice exam. on some of the stuff you can do for the AZ-900. Nice little feature to have. Going back to the AZ-900, what you want to do when you start studying for this exam is you want to take a look at the skills measured. Now you'll see here that according to the latest, let me bring this right in front of me here. According to the latest and greatest from Microsoft, this actually, hold on. Can you actually see what I'm doing? Yes, you can. Okay. So this tells you're going to describe cloud concepts in 25 to 30% of the questions, describe Azure architecture and services in 35 to 40% of the questions, and the other 30 to 35% is describing Azure management and governance. Scrolling down further, you'll see there's a couple ways to proceed here. I highly recommend, you know what, if you want to use my boot camp here, I appreciate it, guys. I really do. Share it out to all your friends, but you should never use just one form of training. Number one, it's not going to cover everything. I'm going to cover the important stuff here. I'm going to cover probably 90% of what's going on in the exam, but we're going to miss a few things because there's just not enough time. And you should be doing some self-study on your own. So there's a learning path here from Microsoft Learn. You've got 3 modules for describing cloud concepts, 4 modules for Azure architecture and services, and another 4 for Azure management and governance. Now, the other big thing to look at here, when we go to the very top of the page, you will see review the AZ-900 study guide. This is a big one. So you'll see here there are study guides for all the exams that are out there on the left-hand side. In the center here, we're on the AZ-900, and this is updated as of January 23rd, 2024. The exam is constantly refreshed for the latest and greatest stuff that's out there. Make sure you're studying for the right thing. Now, for the most part, the meat and potatoes of the exam stays the same. But there will be the additional stuff. There is a little bit of AI on this now, just knowing what the AI services are called and basic generic ideas of what they can do. Let's embarrass my son. My son, LGZ Productions, Logan. How you doing, buddy? He wants to know LeBron or Jordan. You know my answer. Jordan, no matter what, go Knicks. Don't talk that LeBron nonsense with me. Either way. My son always there to lend a helping hand. So if we scroll down, you'll see measures sealed as of January 23rd, 2024. And this actually breaks down not just the 3 core categories of cloud concepts, architecture, and management, but it also breaks them down even further. And it shows us underneath that 25 to 30%, you'll have described cloud computing, which is these 7 concepts: cloud computing, shared responsibility, cloud models, including public, private, and hybrid, identify appropriate use cases for each cloud model, describe the consumption-based model, compare cloud pricing models, and describe serverless. Also in that 25, 30% of cloud concepts, you've got things like describe the benefits of using cloud services, describe cloud service types, like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. We're going to touch on a few of these things tonight. Tonight, we're just starting things off slow, going to get them going gradually, and I want to introduce cloud in general to y'all tonight. We're not going to dive deep into Azure. Really, we're probably not going to touch Azure at all tonight because I want to introduce the cloud to you appropriately. After that, you've got the 35 to 40% of Azure architecture and services, which is things like availability zones, subscriptions, management groups. You've got basic compute and networking services, like what are compute types, including containers, virtual machines, and functions. Now don't get scared. This does not mean you have to build virtual machines. This does not mean you have to build out containers or no Kubernetes or no Docker, things like that. As I said, this is an entry-level exam. For the most part, completely non-technical. I think you might see one question out there that might be like, this is slightly technical. But for the most part, you don't need to know anything doing this. You have to memorize and identify what the concepts are and use cases, how they're used, when they're used. You'll see here, describe virtual networking and including the purpose of Azure Virtual Networks, Azure Virtual Subnets, peering, Azure DNS, Azure VPN Gateway, and ExpressRoute. You're going to find out what an ExpressRoute line is, what it can do. You're going to discover the differences between regular DNS and Azure DNS. Same concept, service is a little different. For the most part, 90% the same. So if you know DNS by being a networking person, you should be fine. But it always never hurts to double down, study again. Still containing that initial concept group would be describing Azure storage services. You're going to learn about all the different kinds of Azure storage services that are out there, the different storage tiers, the SKUs. what some of the options are for moving files like AZ copy and Azure File Sync. Going to describe Azure Identity, Access, and Security. It used to be called Active Directory. Not anymore. It is called Microsoft Entra ID and Microsoft Entra Domain Services. Same exact thing, new title, new name, brand new fancy moniker, but it's the exact same thing. You will find out what zero trust is. Zero trust is a concept in security that basically says trust nothing, always verify. So it's very important. You'll find out about Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is the built-in Azure and Microsoft 365 security product. Sorry, always need coffee. And then finally, we're going to describe Azure management and governance. You'll learn about cost management. You'll learn about different features and tools like Microsoft Purview, Azure Policy, resource locks. I'll tell you right now, the purpose of resource locks is to lock all your resources down so they don't, one, accidentally get deleted, or two, get changed. So there's two different kinds of resource locks we'll look at. Some of the features and tools for managing and deploying Azure resources. You'll learn how to look at the portal. We'll walk you through that for a little bit. We'll do some live demos. You'll discover, if you haven't already seen it, what Azure Cloud Shell is, what the Azure Command Line interface is, and what Azure PowerShell is. I used to teach PowerShell for a living for a couple of years. So I've done a lot of courses on that one. I will probably go back and do a separate PowerShell and CLI course in the future. We'll probably pre-record that, walk you through doing a couple labs, how to get better at PowerShell, but you don't need it for this exam. You don't need to understand what the commandlets are, what they do. You just have to understand what is PowerShell and where would you go use it. What the purpose is of Azure Arc. Describe infrastructure as code. Like I said, you're not going to be coding at all. You don't ever have to code. I'd recommend it in the future, but you don't need to code at all for this exam. You don't have to code as an administrator. It definitely helps if you can, but you don't have to. I would definitely recommend it though. You'll learn about Azure Resource Manager and ARM templates. You'll look at some of the monitoring tools in Azure, like Azure Advisor, Azure Service Health, and Azure Monitor, and also important things like Log Analytics, Azure Monitor Alerts, and Application Insights. And there's a lot of stuff here, people. Microsoft also provides a lot of stuff like self-paced learning paths. You can find documentation on Microsoft Learn, the official Azure documentation. You can ask your questions to the Microsoft Azure Community Support site. And then there's also some really cool videos that Microsoft does on how to prep for an exam, how to make sure you're ready and understand what the exam looks like. So there's a lot we can do here. I'm planning for 6 weeks. What I'm thinking about doing is weeks 1 through 5. Let me just remove this. Weeks 1 through 5, we're going to do core concepts, Azure exam fundamentals, maybe stick a few extra things in there, have a little bit of fun. Week 6 is planning on being an exam prep. This will be your last stop. Say you are studying for 6 weeks with us as you're doing this. You'll do your exam prep that final week. Take some practice exams. I'll ask you some questions live here. We'll have a wide open Q&A for an hour or so. And if I see we're kind of lagging, I'd like to keep this about an hour for each session. If I see we're lagging behind or we want to do more, if people have a lot more questions than I anticipated, we'll make this longer. This is your foray into cloud. I want to make sure it answers all the questions that you have. And I will tell you if it's on the exam, if it's not on the exam. I mean, I obviously cannot tell you questions that are on the exam because of the NDA and things like that I had to sign when I took the exam, and y'all will as well. You cannot copy questions on the exam. You can't take screenshots. You can't take pictures, but you can relate your experience. And that's what I'm trying to do for you guys. So without any further ado, let's kind of jump into things. And we're going to take a look at this, AZ-900 Azure Fundamentals Exam Bootcamp. I call this Empowering Your Cloud Journey. Let's take one more sip of coffee because, as I said before, coffee is life. And I want you all to be aware that please ask any questions you have throughout the course. There is no specific, I'll leave Q&A at the end for an open few minutes. But if you have any questions while I'm lecturing, teaching, showing, demonstrating, please ask away. I want to make sure that you can feel free to ask any questions, comments. If you catch any crazy little, let's just say typos, please fire them away in the comments. I'd love to fix my, I think I proofread the presentation a couple times, but if you find something, please let me know what it is, because I'm going to be posting this up on the GitHub site. Also too, in the comments after this, the Discord server is up. So you can talk about your AZ-900 journey, your AZ-104, containers, architecture, different certifications in general. So I'll post a link for the Discord server. It has been live since this morning. Still very basic, but we're going to get this thing branched out more and more as we go. So to begin, once again, welcome to the AZ-900 Azure Fundamentals Exam Bootcamp. This is week 1 of empowering your cloud journey. As I said, weeks 1 through 5, we're going to cover Azure services, cloud concepts, basic security and compliancy stuff, Azure pricing. You have to know pricing. Pricing is huge, but we're going to show you how to use the Azure price calculator. We're going to show you how you can get into the very basics of what's called FinOps, financial operations, how you can keep your costs down, how to set a budget. When you're first learning cloud, Azure, AWS, GCP, I don't care what it is, whatever platform you're on, it's very important to keep a budget in mind. Now, when you sign up for an Azure subscription, which we're going to do next week, we'll show you how to do that live. There's a way that you can set a budget so that when you hit your maximum that you want to use, it shuts down all your cloud because you don't want to get charged more than you're willing to allocate. As a Microsoft certified trainer, I get $100 per month of spend for my subscription in Azure. I've only ever hit it once. So usually just doing basic build out, basic practice, you'll probably spend between 20 and 50 a month. Not much for purposes. And I would say for your AZ-900, you're probably looking at, if you've had no exposure to cloud at all, or even IT, I would say 1 to 2 months of study. If you've been in IT for a while, if you've been in networking, you've been in security, you've been a systems admin, you're doing Linux, things like that, you might need just a couple of weeks to pass this exam. So, but I want to give you a heads up ahead of time as to what you can expect and how long you can do this for. Moving on, all about me. Yeah, it's an older picture. It's less gray. I am more gray. You can see in the beard now. My name is Corey Knapp. I am also known as the Big Bald Azure Guy. I am a Microsoft certified architect. I've probably got close to 10 current Microsoft certifications. Excuse me. I've probably got 5 or 6 that are lapsed. So I've probably passed 15 to 16 of these over the past couple of years. I am a current Microsoft certified trainer. I have over 25 years in the tech industry, ranging from government to casino to entertainment, insurance, medical, and private sector, across the board, across the gamut. I worked for multiple MSPs. I'm a former trainer for Linux Academy and A Cloud Guru, as well as Cloud Skills with Mike Pfeiffer, which is now owned by INE. So you've probably seen me on some of the platforms teaching Azure Fundamentals, teaching PowerShell and Azure PowerShell. And my mission for you guys is to provide an engaging and informative training experience and fun, equipping you with the knowledge you need to excel in the Azure AZ-900 Azure Fundamentals exam. So sounds kind of formal, but that's my goal for y'all. Moving on. Week 1, intro to cloud computing and Azure. Let's just change that to intro to cloud computing, because I don't think we're even going to touch on Azure tonight. We're just going to touch on cloud computing in general. So let me hide myself here so you can see everything. I'd like to start this kickstarting your Azure journey. So the key objectives of this week is understanding the basics of cloud computing, what some of the basic concepts are. If we go to the next slide, we're going to touch on today, what is cloud computing? We're going to get kind of boring here initially. Definition. Yeah, I know. It's kind of boring to read a definition up, but that's what we're going to do here on this one slide. The definition of cloud computing. Cloud computing is the delivery of computing services, including servers, storage, databases, networking, software, analytics, and intelligence, including AI and machine learning, over the internet, which is also known as the cloud, to offer fast innovation, flexible resources, and economies of scale. So what does that all mean? You've probably seen, if you've been on Facebook, if you've been on LinkedIn, if you've been on any kind of social media platform over the past 5 to 6 years, since cloud has really taken off, you've probably seen a little comic of a little kid being held by his father, and the son says, or the kid says to his father, "Daddy, what are clouds?" And the father says, "Other people's computers." It's kind of humorous, it's kind of funny, but it's also true. All cloud is a platform through a major service provider. We've got 3 major ones out there. We can actually probably call it 5, but 3 major ones are Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform. You've also got IBM Oracle Cloud, and you've got Alibaba. There are numerous other ones out there. You can also stand up your own private cloud. These are public clouds we're talking about right now. And we will differentiate between the difference between public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid next week. But I want you to be aware there are all kinds of different clouds out there. The benefit to having cloud, you only pay for what you use. Back in the day, I mean, I remember where I was the lone person in an IT shop, and I'd have 2 or 3 racks stood up behind me of, say, with anywhere from 10 to 15 servers in each rack. You had to pay for each computer. And you want to make sure you were optimizing that usage as best you can, because that was a capital expense up front. You had to pay all, I mean, you may have been paying monthly expenses on your purchases, but you were still paying a capital expense. Just say $2,000 per server, $5,000 for the rack. You're talking probably what, 30 or 40K off the bat for each rack. Say you had 3 filled behind you, you're probably talking $100,000 of capital expenses sitting in a server room, sitting behind you for the IT manager, and you have one room, shares all. But what you have to realize is that day is gone. Now, some people still, so a lot of companies still have hybrid, where you've got partially in the cloud and you've got partially capital expenses on site. But really, there's, other than time, management, money, resources, getting things up to the cloud is pretty simple. So what you do now, there are startups now who can, I'm a startup. I am big bald Azure guy training. In order for me to do what, I've got my own bigbaldazure.com website, bigbaldazure.com email. The website's not up yet, folks. It will be very shortly. I've got a Discord server. I've got Teams. I can schedule meetings. I can do word processing. I've got file storage. I've got spreadsheets. I can build presentations and store them online and save them out to my phone from my OneDrive. Whereas before, that might have taken minimum of 2 to 3 servers, including an Exchange server, which is very pricey. No, I have a free tenant from Microsoft that's a dev environment that I can play with once that trial is over. I think it costs me $9 a month per user. That's cheap. That's for examples of platform as a service. We'll get there shortly. But my point is, there's no longer a need for small companies to have to sit there and buy desktop servers and then upgrade to 1 or 2 use servers in a rack, or upgrade to 4 use servers, or you've got to worry about CPUs and APCs and power supplies and appropriate voltage in the room and server racks with fire suppression systems. And I mean, this goes back to my days in the late 90s, where I was out converting old 1950s courthouses to server farms and having to abate asbestos before you could put lines in, and halon fire suppression systems, all kinds of crazy stuff. No, you can have literally 2 or 3 people. I'm going to start with a friend of mine. There's just 5 of us right now. We have our own email addresses. We have our own platform as a service software online. We're spread out across 4 different states. We do weekly meetings. We do weekly get-togethers. The company I work for now, there is no central global HQ. We've got 750, 800 users across the world who work remotely. And there is no central data center. It's all up in the cloud, available, and we only pay for what we use. So those are the benefits of what cloud computing is. And as it says here, you typically only pay for what you use, helping lower operating costs. And it becomes, I said, instead of a capital expense, it becomes an operating expense. It becomes a monthly charge, quarterly charge. You track them according to quarterly and yearly operating expenses. It runs infrastructure more efficiently, and you can scale as your business changes, as your business needs change. I'll show you when I talk about scalability, I will explain what I mean by scalability. Going on to the next one here. Well, let's blow it up real big, real quick so y'all can see it. On-demand availability. Cloud services are available on demand, allowing users to provision vast computing resources in minutes, typically without direct intervention from the service provider. What does that mean? If you want a computer, a virtual machine, you want an Azure Virtual Desktop, you want a virtual machine, you want a database, you want to do machine learning workspace, you want to set up a log analytics workspace, we're talking minutes for deployment. And if you use infrastructure as code, you're talking minutes for entire landing zones with multiple VMs, multiple monitoring, multiple logging zones, custom dashboarding. If you are using infrastructure as code, you can do things and you can deploy entire landing zones for deployments like SAP, deployments like Microsoft Sentinel, which used to take days to properly do. If you get things templatized up front, plug in your variables, you can deploy an entire infrastructure in just minutes. And like I said, you only pay for what you use. If you don't use it, you take it down, you delete it, you're not charged for it. So the benefits for this are immense. Sorry, I have to drink that coffee. But either way, moving on to this one here. This actually says cloud services. Let's talk about broad network access. Cloud services are accessible over the network through standard mechanisms that promote use by heterogeneous, thin or thick client platforms like. And you see the list. Basically, what this means is you can get to the cloud from everywhere. Your mobile phone, your iPhone, your Samsung phone, your Nokia, or you want to talk about tablets. I've got a Samsung tablet right here. I've got a Samsung phone right here. There's an iPad somewhere in my house. There is a Kindle Fire tablet somewhere in my house. It's old, not working, but it's in my house. I've got 2 laptops on my desk. You can use a workstation. You can use a server. You can get to anywhere you have internet access, you can get to the cloud from. That's what broad network access means. Resource pooling. This is a big one. Basically, the provider's resources are pooled to serve multiple consumers using a multi-tenant model with different physical and virtual resources dynamically assigned and reassigned according to consumer demand. All right, that's a lot. Let's break it down. So what does this mean? Microsoft, for example, has data centers all over the world dedicated just for Azure. In these data centers, they have what's called a rack. In a rack, they may have 20 servers. These servers are what make up the Azure resources. Now, on each one of those servers, things are broken down by, I'm not going to break down how it works, but we'll do that as we move on. But just imagine this. On those 20 servers, you may have 500 customers, 500 companies as customers. Probably not that many, but regardless, I'll even show you pictures next week of actually data centers underwater for cooling, which is kind of cool. No pun intended. But my point is, everything is dedicated up. It's dynamically assigned and reassigned. So if you create 5 servers, they are on that rack. If you delete one of them, that storage space, that memory, everything else is then reallocated to the next consumer. It may be you, it may be somebody else. Regardless, you may have enough hardware. Trixie, what are you doing? Sorry, dog's cleaning herself again. Always fun. But my point is, things are always evolving. Things are always changing. You may have 1,000 VMs in a rack and maybe spread out across 3 customers, might be spread out across 300. You never know. But my point is, that space is always being used and it's always being dynamically assigned and reassigned physical resources, virtual resources as they're being upgraded. Your VM may be allocated to a different rack or a different part of that rack while they upgrade a virtual machine, but you're using a copy of it, you don't even realize. So it's being upgraded for patching and things like that. There's zero downtime. We'll talk about availability zones. We'll talk about just a ton of different stuff on how there are disaster recovery scenarios in place. There is high availability in place. We'll talk about scale sets. We'll talk about you name it. But there is an absolute ton of resources out there that you're going to learn. And as you see, they're not difficult to track what they are and how they do. It may be difficult to administrate them initially. As you are exposed more to them day by day, it becomes easier. But my point is, just learning what they are is pretty easy to pick up. And that's what we're trying to cover here for this exam. Learn what these resources are. Learn what these platform offerings are. What are they used for? Not how do you configure them? How do you implement them? What are they used for? Use case scenario type stuff. So we're going to get to all that. Elasticity. This is a big one. Let's say, for example, let's read this actually, because I want everybody to understand that I do create these slides for a reason. Rapid elasticity. Capabilities can be elastically provisioned and released, in some cases automatically, to scale rapidly outward and inward, commensurate with demand. And that's a big word. Why did I put that in there? To the user, the capabilities available for provisioning often appear to be unlimited and can be appropriated in any quantity at any time. Once again, let's break this down. What does this mean? Elasticity. So, say you are a tax company. Say you are a H&R Block type company, and you have, during Non-tax season, you've got 5 tax people working for you in your office. You've got 5 cloud workstations that you need. Um, but during the tax season, you hire on 15 or 20 consultants. You hire 15 to 20 contractors, and all of a sudden you need 20 more virtual machines or 20 more workstations or 20 more Azure virtual workstations. Guess what? Spin them up just like that. When they're not working for you anymore, take them back down. Elastic means you can scale out and you can scale back in when you need to, on demand. And like I said, sometimes it appears unlimited. I mean, so you could scale up from all of a sudden. I mean, you see companies rapidly, they win contracts and they go from being a 400 person company to a 4,000 person company overnight. That used to mean waiting for deployment of resources for 4,000 people, hardware, software. Not anymore. It's all cloud based. You could have enough stuff cloud based resources for people almost immediately. I mean, it's amazing how fast this stuff goes. And we're going to show you as we deploy VMs, as we deploy workstations, as we deploy full-blown NoSQL databases or MySQL databases, how quickly these things can get spun up. Kind of cool. Measured services. Cloud systems automatically control and optimize resource use by leveraging a metering capability at some level of abstraction appropriate to the type of service, whether it's storage, processing, bandwidth, active user accounts, you name it. Resource usage can be monitored, controlled, and reported, providing transparency for both the provider and consumer of the utilized service. What this means is anything you can do in cloud can be measured, tracked, and why you're paying for it, what you're paying for, how you're paying for it. You can track everything using tools like Azure Monitor and also doing custom dashboarding things for things like FAP, where you can track how many users you've got, how many licenses you've got, how many VMs, how many CPUs are allocated for those VMs, how much memory is allocated per VM, how many hard drives. Are they talking solid state drives? Are you talking old premium fast hard drives? So it all depends, but you can track everything. Anything you do in cloud can and will be measured to your degree of specificity. You can get as granular as you want. So I want you to remember when we talk about those characteristics, elasticity, measured cost, going back here, resource pooling, broad network access, on-demand availability. Those characteristics define what cloud computing is and how it differentiates from traditional hosting services. So you have flexibility, efficiency, and scalability to users, small companies, mid-sized companies, large-sized companies, etc. Before I move on to the next step here, the next little mini chapter we're going to cover tonight, any questions about that kind of stuff, please drop them in the chat. If you're not catching this live, catch the replay, send me the comments. Write your questions in the comments. I'll be glad to answer them when I get a chance. Let's start real quick, and if any questions come up, we'll answer them real quick. Next, we're going to talk about different types of cloud computing. Walter says, all clear. Fantastic, brother. Appreciate it. All right. And let me know if you have any questions in the meantime, or you want further elaboration on stuff, please let me know. So let's talk about three main kinds of cloud computing. What we have is first, infrastructure as a service, also known as IaaS. Let's read the definition. Here's the book definition, folks. It provides virtualized computing resources over the internet. IaaS is the most basic category of cloud services, allowing you to rent IT infrastructure, servers, virtual machines, storage, networks, operating expenses from a cloud provider on a pay-as-you-go basis. Some of the examples: Amazon Web Services, EC2 instances, Microsoft Azure Virtual Machines. We've talked about those ad nauseum already. A Google Compute Engine. So when I say a virtual machine, that is an example in Azure of an infrastructure as a service component. A couple benefits. As we said before, there's no need to invest in physical hardware. You have full control over your inventory, over your infrastructure, and it's scalable and flexible. I know you're going to hear this a lot over the next 6 weeks about scalability and flexibility and adaptability. That is one of the biggest selling points. And that's also what I want to bring up here. You do not need to be technical to take this exam, people. I recommend everybody who I work with who even deals with Azure sales. They may not be technical people whatsoever, but I recommend they take this exam so they can discuss cloud. They will know just the selling points of cloud just by studying for this exam, and it'll help them in their daily sales process. So, like I said, this is not technical. This is just what are the benefits, what are the use case scenarios, and how does cloud work, and why is it great? I mean, I remember being asked 5 years ago, do you think cloud's here to stay or is it just a fad? Oh, no, it's here to stay, folks. It really is. So that's infrastructure as a service. The next step up is called platform as a service. Now, I'm actually going to show you guys a diagram next week breaking down the components of IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. I'll show you all that stuff. But I want to just introduce you and let it marinate for a couple of days before we continue next Saturday. Platform as a service is the next step. So that, let's read it again, provides a platform allowing customers to develop, run, and manage applications without the complexity of building and maintaining the infrastructure typically associated with developing and launching an app. PaaS can include infrastructure, servers, storage, and networking, but also middleware, developmental tools, business intelligence services, database management systems, and more. So we're talking about things like Microsoft Azure web apps, web applications. You're talking about Google App Engine, AWS Elastic Beanstalk. This is where you combine multiple infrastructure as a service components and some middleware, and you're giving an offering. You're giving them a platform that they can use. So we're talking things like Azure web apps where you're going to do an application, but that also includes some of the accompanying infrastructure as part of that, the security, the networking. It simplifies your development process by providing frameworks that developers can build upon. Supports multiple programming languages and frameworks. We're talking Python, .NET, Golang. You name the programming language out there, there's most likely either an API call or a supported plugin for Azure to make it work with it properly. And it's also cost effective because you're not paying for the hardware. As we said before, this is the bonus. So let's move on. Last one is software as a service. This is the one that everyone doesn't realize they're using. Paper definition again, delivers software applications over the internet on a subscription basis. SaaS provides a complete software solution which you purchase on a pay-as-you-go basis from a cloud service provider. You rent the use of an app for your org, and your users connect to it over the internet, usually with a web browser. How many of you out there are using Google Workspaces? That includes things like, and let's just go to this real quick. Let me bring it up. I'm going to bring up Google here real quick. And if you take a look, well, I'm not going to share it in my mail, but you've got things like your Google Drive. You've got things like Google Docs. You've got Google Books. You've got Google Earth. You've got Google Sheets, Google Slides. You're also talking about things like Microsoft 365, which includes Exchange, Outlook, OWA, Outlook Web Access. You're talking about things like PowerPoint, Word, Excel, Publisher, all those pieces of software that are available on the internet. Something like Canva, where people do graphic design or creating YouTube thumbnails. I've used Canva. That's software as a service. I'm using StreamYard to do this. StreamYard is software as a service. It's not Microsoft owned, but there's another one called, I think it's AWS backended, but I think the Azure backended one, I believe, is Restream. There's a couple other ones out there. So these are ideas, and these are examples of software as a service. Anything you pay a subscription for the most part, is software as a service. Things like the Adobe Creative Solutions package, or you can get all the different Adobe Graphic Studio and Internet Studio software out there. I'm not a graphic guy, so I really couldn't tell you, but I think they have a $19 or $29 package a month to access all of their software. That's an example of software as a service. Benefits: no installation, maintenance, hardware required. You can get to it from anywhere with an internet connection. For example, on my phone here, I have Outlook, I have Word, I have PowerPoint. I don't have Excel because it's too small. Even though I've got the pen, I can do it. I don't do that. It's just too small. And it's scalable, flexible pricing models. For example, base, I think you've got, well, we'll go over the different kinds of licensing out there, but there's things like E3 and E5 licensing. Some are $9 a month, some are $20 a month, some are $30 a month per user. It all depends on what you want access to. You can get copies of Visio added on as licenses to your subscription for an extra $5 a month, things like that. So there are different flexible pricing options and pricing models. Real quick summary. Let me hide my face. You out. But like I said, it pays to start thinking about things in a cloud generic way. You don't need to focus right now on Azure, AWS, GCP. Just focus in general. Be cloud, just cloud native. We don't want to be platform native. We want to say, okay, how does the cloud work? What is the benefit of using these kinds of models? What does it mean to be elastic? What does it mean to be scalable? So these concepts are key to working with cloud on a daily basis. We got one more chapter to cover tonight, folks. Any questions? Walter, you good so far, brother? I see 4 of the people out there, so I want to make sure we got everybody's answers. Anybody's questions answered? Any other problems, please let me know. I'll take questions from now till the end. And like I said, if you're watching this replay, please post your questions in the comments. I'll be glad to get to them after the fact. All right, without further ado, let's jump back in. So add this to the stage. Here we go. Oh, Walter's got one. Let's see here. Would containers being used in the cloud be an example of platform as a service? Absolutely. Same way a virtual machine. Now, see, but then again, we're going to talk about this. It could be platform. It could be. Tell you what, let's go back here. I'll show you. So if we go back here, platform, great example, but it also could be infrastructure. So what you're doing, containers are basically virtual instances. So I would lean more towards IaaS. However, if you're talking about Kubernetes, which is an orchestration engine or orchestration manager for containers, then you're talking about platform as a service. So there are different, great questions. So there are different things that straddle the line. Are they infrastructure? Are they platform? Do they do both? Containers themselves, I'd say, are infrastructure as a service. However, managing them as a platform. So good question. Good question. Appreciate that. All right, moving on here to the next section. Benefits of cloud computing. We probably talked about this already, but I want to make sure we get it covered completely before we move on. Biggest one here. Let's make the slide big again so you can see me. We'll make my humongously bald melon small here in the corner. Actually, let's hide it because I can't read it. Let's do this again. There we go. That's better. Definition of cost efficiency. Cloud computing reduces the financial expense of running IT operations by leveraging a pay-as-you-go model, minimizing the need for significant upfront capital expenditure on hardware and software. We said it. We'll keep saying it. Running in the cloud is cost efficient compared to running hardware. Now, I will tell you, it can also get very pricey to run in the cloud. I have seen monthly company budgets blown up because people aren't being efficient, no pun intended, as far as monitoring what's used, what's not used, disabling what's not used instead of keeping it running. I've been guilty of it. I stood up an example of a couple of web apps using my $100 a month allowance through my Microsoft certified trainer subscription. It wasn't cost me a dime, but I was playing with the idea of launching some web apps, and I ran them, played around with them for a couple of days, and they probably cost me, I'd guess, about $5 or $6 a day to run. Now, with $100 allowance per month, that's great. 30 days in a month, though, you forget about that. So once I hit about day 18 or 19, I got an email because my budget had been reached, I should say, and said, all Azure services have been stopped because your budget has been reached. Whoops. So unless I wanted to keep going and pay cash for it, which I didn't, I took a break for 10 days. And then once the first of the month kicked over, I had my $100 available again. So it's very important as you're installing things. Number one, if they're not going to be used anymore, get rid of them, reallocate them. Or also, too, when you're talking about virtual machines or databases, things that are sized. If you're talking about somebody who literally uses a virtual machine to look at email, maybe write a Word document, you're not going to give them an 8 CPU, GPU-enabled 64 gig machine. It's going to cost you $1,000 a month. You can get away with a free one. You can get away with one that costs $1 a day. Um, and we'll look at the Azure price calculator on how to do these things and how to estimate them. When I create virtual machines or virtual workstations using cloud PCs or using Azure Virtual Desktop, I typically break things into categories where I've got people who barely use their computer, people who use them for programming, people who use them for graphics, and people who do them for a ton of other stuff. So what you'll do is you'll have categories and say, this is the base model for this group, this is the base model for this group, and so on. And we'll get through there. We'll get to that. Next one. We're going to talk about it again. Let's change my face. My face should be on this side now. There we go. Definition of scalability. Cloud services can be easily scaled up or down based on demand, allowing businesses to adjust resources efficiently without the need for physical hardware change. As we said it, tax company, 5 employees during non-tax season, 20 employees during tax season. They bring on 15 extra virtual machines during tax season. They can spin them up in minutes. When tax season's over and those employees go away, they disable them. They don't need them. They can deactivate them, decommission them, don't need them anymore. And they only have the extra expense for the cloud. They only extra cloud expense during that short 2-3 month period, say from January 1st to tax day. After that, maybe they hang on for another month. Instead of 15 employees, they only have 7 extras because they got some stragglers who are doing taxes late, things like that. So that's the benefits of having scalability, is the on-demand growth and shrinkage based on business growth or spikes in demand. And as I say, once again, we'll keep on saying this. You only pay for what you use when you use it. We're going to kill this again, people. You're going to hate me by the end of this. Wrong size. There we go. Flexibility and elasticity. These are the benefits once again. Cloud computing offers the flexibility to use and customize resources as needed and the elasticity to adapt quickly to changing requirements or workload demands. You can rapidly deploy new apps and services, and you can also play around and experiment to your heart's content. That's the great thing is, back in the day, maybe you had a spare laptop. Maybe you had a spare PC that you built. Maybe you managed to buy an old decommissioned machine from your job, but you brought home an extra couple PCs for $25-30 a piece. I've done it in the past. We're talking 20 years ago now. Now, you log on Microsoft Azure, you spin up a virtual machine, and you can play around. You can spin up a Microsoft Azure machine learning environment. You can spin up multiple databases. You can spin up anything on demand. Make sure you can pay for it. But other than that, I mean, anything is there for you to use. So the sky's the limit. This is a big one. Disaster recovery. I'm actually going to hide my face for this one because this one's important. So let's go right there. So what is disaster recovery? First off, disaster recovery is when it hits the fan. Remember the old movie Airplane? When it hits the fan. We're going to leave it like that. Cloud computing enhances Cloud computing enhances disaster recovery efforts by enabling faster recovery of applications, data, and infrastructure from cloud-based backups. So what does this mean? Disaster recovery means if this happens, what do I do? Well, you can deploy in availability zones. You can deploy in scale sets. You can have your backups online now for your on-prem stuff. There are a ton of different cases here. For example, at work, I am building out a multi-regional web application infrastructure. So I have got web application gateways and Azure Firewall in a US East region. I've got duplicates in the US West. That's my disaster recovery zone. I have them syncing their settings from east to west. So that way, if the east goes down, God forbid it doesn't, but if it does, the west picks up automatically. And also in between those two, I have what's called Azure Traffic Manager, which is a global service that you put endpoints in place, one for US East, one for US West. So that way, if Traffic Manager detects that the East region is down, it automatically fails over to the West. Now, it's a little more complex than that, but in essence, that's what it's a, oh crap, what happens? Oh, blank. What happens if this happens? So there's a hurricane, there's a electrical outage. You know what? Data centers go down on occasion. It's very rare, but it does happen. Including AWS, Microsoft, Google, everybody else. It can happen. So you want to make sure when you're setting things up in the cloud, if you can't afford to lose connectivity, you've got disaster recovery and high availability in place just in case something happens. And certain companies have different service level agreements. So that means, do they have to have availability 99.9% of the time, 99.999% of the time? It adds up. So the key thing here is to realize everything you do in the cloud, you can enable disaster recovery for. Some of it's manual, some of it's automatic, and we'll take a look at all the different kinds of solutions as part of this training. So good to know. Performance. I like this slide. It's just kind of fun. So what we're talking about here, when we talk about this slide, is performance. I'm not going to read this one off. We understand. We want to make sure that you have the availability for high performance computing when you need it, how you need it, how often you need it. We want to make sure that you can get access to these things with really slow, really low latency, not slow, low latency. We don't want to sit here and wait 18 hours to spin up a SQL on demand cluster. We don't want to wait 3 hours to spin up a virtual machine that just drags. No. So the benefit of performance here, we will read this, is that they maintain a global network of secure data centers which are regularly upgraded to the latest gen of efficient computing hardware. So when I say they're not running servers that are 10 years old, they are constantly upgrading these data centers to have the latest and greatest. So that way you can have the latest and greatest. So you're talking about GPU enabled computers. You're talking about super fast non-structured databases. You're talking about setting up Azure functions. We'll learn about all this kind of stuff. But my point is, it's always there and always on. Monitoring tools, SIEM, security tools, things like that are very quick, very agile. And the amount of logs, for example, like you can turn on logging. There's always basic logging in effect for Azure, but you can turn on logging enough that you could read till the end of the days. But then you've got the software and the tools that enable you to sort through that logging and find exactly what you're looking for. And then you may have to learn some things like KQL, but that's not for this exam. But there are so many things you can do with this data. Not to mention, let's talk about data in general. That's for high availability as well. If you've got terabytes or even more petabytes of data up in the cloud in US East, you want to access it quickly. So you've got different tiers of access. You've got hot tiers, you've got cool tiers, you've got cold tiers on how fast and how quickly you can get access to that kind of data. Also, too, where are you syncing that to have a backup solution? Then you're also talking about things performance like CDNs, cache delivery networks, where you're talking about if I have a web app that's global, does it make sense for somebody who is accessing the application from, say, Sydney, Australia, but the app is based in North Carolina? Does it make sense for them to log into a North Carolina access point? Terminology is wrong. Just bear with me. Understand this. No, what they should do is log into a point that's closer to them. Maybe they log into a Japanese local delivery network. Maybe they log into an Australian one. Maybe they log into one that's somewhere in Indonesia. Or maybe they even just West Coast as opposed to East Coast US. So these are different things you can think about when you're doing this. Excuse me, losing my voice. So final slide, summary of these. What are the summary of cloud computing benefits? Let me hide my face one more time. There we go. So cloud computing offers a transformative, bleh, you're watching Transformers too much, people, approach to managing IT resources, providing significant advantages in cost, scalability, flexibility, disaster recovery, and performance. And that's it for tonight. As I said, I want to keep things very non-platform specific. I want to be very agnostic and say what I talked about here applies to all the major cloud platforms. It applies to all the minor cloud platforms. It applies to all the private cloud platforms. What are the benefits? Why are we doing this kind of stuff? And the great thing is here, I kept things right at about an hour, which is great. I'm thinking next week we'll probably go slightly over an hour because there's a lot we're going to start covering once we get into Azure. And If it gets to the point where we've got too much to cover, we may extend this a week or two because, like I said, there's a lot to cover here. I want to make sure we get everything covered that is on the exam so that way you feel comfortable. What I want y'all to do, if you're going through this with me, let's share out once again. Let me go to the Microsoft Learn page. If I can find it. And let me share out this page, add to stage. You'll see here I Googled AZ-900. I scroll down to the Microsoft Learn exam AZ-900. And you will see as we do this, scroll down, self-paced. I want you to start Azure Fundamentals Describe Cloud Concepts, this learning path. So if you go into this one, it shows us describing cloud computing, has some knowledge checks in there, the benefits, cloud service types, stuff that we kind of covered tonight. This will be a little more in detail. Obviously, we covered everything tonight in just under an hour. But my point is, this will, if you go into Introduction to Azure Fundamentals, you'll take a look here. What is this? Why should I take it? It covers what we just talked about. We want to talk about Intro to Cloud Computing, learning objectives. What is cloud computing? It has a short video that you can watch, and we'll say, oh, let's watch this video.
What is cloud computing?
This is Microsoft's internal free training for the AZ-900. Now, keep in mind, Microsoft also has training that is not certification centric. It has just in general. So, but for me, this is my number one source I go to when I study for a Microsoft exam, is start with the official documentation from Microsoft. And to me, that's the great thing is I will always, if I'm learning something brand new, when I started doing AI and machine learning a couple of years back, about 2 years back now, I started off watching a video off by one of the major platforms out there, whether it was a Pluralsight, whether it was a Code Academy, I forget who it was I was learning with at the time, or Zero to Mastery is who I was using, I believe. But I also paired it with the official Azure documentation and I read through things. So I'll sit there and I'll take notes and I'll write my stuff down. I also advise taking notes. Studies have shown that handwriting your notes, whether it's on a tablet or whether it's with a pen, will help you learn things 40% more efficiently. I'll actually go through that one with you as well. And I'm going to recommend a course called Learning How to Learn next week that you can really take a look at to really up your level on how to learn, especially if you've been out of college for quite a while, like I was when I first started back and studying for these kind of exams, because it's like we're kind of back in school again. So we'll take a look at that as well. So like I said, start off, you don't need to finish everything, but take a look at least at the first learning path. I want you to be able to finish all 3 of these learning paths by the time we're done after week 6. And honestly, that's not asking a whole lot because most of these aren't that long. This one will tell you here, this is 17 minutes for this one, 17 minutes for this one, 12 minutes. So you're talking an hour for the first learning path. That's not bad at all. So maybe you go through an hour homework, you go through and just remind yourself of what we talked about tonight. As always, I want you to send any questions, comments you have in the comments below in this video. Email them off to me. You can grab me on LinkedIn as well. Walter says here, you hit the nail on the head with learning how to learn. It's amazing what being out of school for 10 plus years does to your ability to soak things up. You're not kidding, my friend. I stopped going to school. God, it's been over 25 years now since I've been out of school of any kind, I think. Maybe 24. Right around 2000 and there was when I was done with all schooling. And high school was way before that. And before I got back into certification, I did a few right around 2000, 2001. Then I took about a 15-year break. I didn't jump back into seriously reskilling certifications till about probably 2018, 2019. So 6 years ago. And I had been out of official school for so long that I had forgotten how to take notes. I had forgotten things about physical learning, virtual learning, and then also ways of diffuse thinking, different ways of setting things like Pomodoro timers. And we all know cramming overnight doesn't help you learn. You learn better in bite-sized chunks. That's why I want to keep these sessions under an hour if I can. If that means I have to extend this class out 2-3 weeks, I don't care. I want you to have bite-sized increments. And to me, about an hour it's my personal limit. I don't want to teach for 3-4 hours on end because then I lose track and I lose my voice and I'm almost out of coffee and it's not a good thing. But My point is we keep things digestible, we keep them manageable. So Walter, thanks for your input, my friend. As always, man, appreciate your input. So get through those learning pathways. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I will put the link for the Discord server in the chat. Start talking in there. Ask me any questions you have on there. And that'll do it for this week, folks. That is the end of week 1 of our AZ-900 bootcamp. Next week, we'll start covering Intro to Azure. We'll learn how to sign up for Azure, how to create a user account. We'll learn about what a subscription is, what some of the basic compute servers, some of the basic compute services are. We might get to networking, maybe not. Depends on how much we dive in deep with compute, which I think we can get pretty deep and pretty dirty on. But it's going to be a lot of fun. So those of you who are here live, I really appreciate your questions. Appreciate you coming here. Those of you who watch the replay, like I said, comment, share out, subscribe to the channel so you can keep up to date on whenever the next live stream is going to be. We will be doing this every Saturday night for at least 6 weeks, maybe 8. I'm thinking more towards 8 as we keep on going here. I'm also, after this 900 boot camp, going to be doing classes for each of these: Linux Essentials, Networking, Bash Scripting, Programming Essentials, Version Control, DevOps, Database Fundamentals, Security Essentials, and Basics of Containers. So when I tell you we have a lot planned, I'm not playing. It's going to be a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. As always, keep on learning, keep on having fun. That'll do it. I'll see you next time. Take care.